Back to Canada we go for this one. Ontario, Canada's biggest province population-wise. This video is going to be very hard to make because I feel as if you could almost make two separate videos on Ontario if you divided them into Northern Ontario and Southern Ontario. But, whatever, let's give it a shot. Personally, I have been pretty much everywhere in Ontario with the exception of all the towns along Highway 11 in Northern Ontario. I have made the trip along Highway 17 from basically where it starts all the way to the end at the Manitoba border. And I've also been pretty much everywhere in Southern Ontario with the exception of a few places. So I feel like I know a thing or two about the province. Anyways, here are a few things that you may want to know before making the move to Ontario. The first thing about Ontario is that there's a lot more to the province than just Toronto. And I don't mean this in a bad way, like not knocking Toronto or anything, but it's something that's true. Ontario is a place that can fit many different lifestyles because of how vast the province is. I think that many people don't even realize how big Ontario truly is and how many different big cities, small towns that there are within the province that can offer completely different lifestyles than places like Toronto or Ottawa or Hamilton or wherever. Toronto is obviously Canada's biggest city, and it's most people's first thought when someone mentions Ontario. But if you've never been to Northern Ontario, I highly recommend checking it out. It is so much different than the rest of the province. Take Highway 17 and visit places like North Bay, Sudbury, Sault Ste. Marie, Thunder Bay, and Kenora, and then all the little towns in between. It's a really interesting drive, and if you've never done it, I highly recommend doing it. And you may find a place for you somewhere in between, but definitely check them out before automatically saying no to Ontario. Second thing, job opportunities. Ontario arguably has the best job opportunities in the country. Toronto is the business hub of Canada. Tech and IT are booming in Ontario. And of course, if you want to be a politician or a bureaucrat, Ottawa's probably the place for you. Forestry is huge in Northern Ontario. And again, let's go back to the business world. HR positions, financial advisors, web developers, and recruitment officers are all jobs that are in high demand in Ontario. So if you're a recent graduate, more than likely, you won't be looking for work for too long if you decide to move to Ontario. The third thing is the cost of living. The cost of living is a very hard stat to measure in Ontario because you can't really make up one single number for the entire province because of how big it is. Having the city of Toronto and then the small town of Wawa 10 hours north of Toronto, it doesn't really work because you can't compare those two places. So I'm going to break it down like this. Toronto, very expensive to live in. Housing is expensive. For example, a city center apartment, which is one bedroom, would run you at least $1,900 a month. But as a consolation, most of the high paying jobs are in Toronto. So pros and cons, right? Ottawa is average. It's not overly expensive, but it's not overly cheap either. A one bedroom apartment downtown Ottawa will run you nearly 1,600 Canadian a month, give or take. And Ottawa is also a place with some very high paying jobs. Windsor, which is right next to Detroit, is what I would consider a cheap city to live in. A downtown one bedroom apartment will be roughly $1,100 a month. And there are lots of people in Windsor that travel across to the Michigan side for work. There are a lot of healthcare workers and such that travel over to Detroit to work in the hospitals there. And lastly, Sault Ste. Marie, which also borders Michigan, just a lot further north. It's a pretty cheap place to live. Mind you, it's definitely not for everyone. A one bedroom apartment will be under $1,000 a month. I think it's roughly in the 980s, 990s. And the Soo is actually one of my favorite places I've been to in Ontario. That being said, I've never been there in the winter, so I can't really speak to that. I imagine it's not overly pleasant. But who knows, that might be a good place for you. The fourth thing is that there's lots to do everywhere. For entertainment purposes, Ontario has a lot to offer. In the sporting world, if you're into that, you have the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Ottawa Senators in the NHL, as well as the Ontario Hockey League, which is a major junior league with teams literally everywhere in the province, running anywhere from Ottawa all the way to Sault Ste. Marie, team in North Bay, Sudbury, all over the place. The Toronto Raptors is Canada's only NBA team, as well the Toronto Blue Jays, the only MLB team. You have Toronto FC in the MLS, and then in the CFL, the Canadian Football League, there are both teams in Toronto and Ottawa. In Kitchener, there is the largest celebration of Oktoberfest outside of Germany. I did not know that prior to making this video. Just learned that on the spot, I guess. Muskoka and Kenora are considered cottage and lake country, but obviously there are way more than just those two places. Those are kind of just the sort of famous places, I guess. Muskoka if you're in the Toronto area, and then Kenora is a very popular spot for people living in Manitoba. Ottawa is home to so many cool museums and historical places. Obviously, Canada's capital, makes sense. And of course, there's so much more to do everywhere else in Ontario. It would take me forever to list off everything. And also, Niagara Falls is a pretty cool place. And the last thing is that if you travel a lot, it's not a bad place to be. When I say this, I'm talking about flying. If you live anywhere in Canada and are going to a destination that's not necessarily super popular, it's not, let's say, Miami or Los Angeles or New York City or the big places, you're probably going to have a connecting flight at Pearson Airport in Toronto. If you move to the Toronto area, the amount of direct flights to different destinations, it doesn't even compare to anywhere else in Canada. This is obviously very attractive for people who, let's say, maybe work from home but have to travel a lot for business, or people like that, or just people who travel for business in general. And another thing in regards to flying is that booking flights in and out of Toronto, it always seems to be cheaper than most other places in Canada, which, to be honest, it makes sense because there's just a higher volume of flights that go in and out of Toronto. And sometimes there's the little exception in Ottawa. Flights also seem to be very cheap out of Ottawa for whatever reason. Honestly, as someone who lives in Montreal, it's not that hard to drive to Ottawa to catch a cheaper flight than flying out of Montreal. But it's all depends on where you're going or where you're coming from. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. There's obviously a lot more to Ontario than what I just said, but these are just a few things that I find interesting, and I feel like it maybe benefit a few people. Leave some suggestions for future videos, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.